All right.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryan Yock, and it's my pleasure to introduce my friend and running partner, Josh Sisson. I've known Josh for about 2 years now, right? Is that about 2 years? And we met through an organization called Achilles International. Achilles International is an organization where guides work with athletes that who are vision impaired to guide them. This is a group of not only vision impaired athletes, but it's also athletes of all types of disabilities that compete in everything from 5Ks to marathons to triathlons, and it's brought us together. And over the last 2 years, I've had an opportunity to be part of Josh's transition from marathons into the ultra running community. Who's a fan of David Goggins in the group? All right? Who just finished a 200, right? With bad knees, so no excuses out there tomorrow for any of us. But Josh is a huge fan of David Goggins, so am I. So it's a pleasure to be here today to introduce my friend and be on the course tomorrow with him. Again, if you see him out there, tell him, stay hard, Josh, right? And there's other Goggins sayings you can say too on the course. So it's my pleasure to introduce Josh.
Hi, all right. Yeah, my name is Josh Sisson. I'm a runner from St. Louis, Missouri. Like Ryan was saying, Ryan has really become sort of my running coach and mentor, in addition to being a really great friend over the last couple of years. And we like to talk about how, finding ways of getting out of your comfort zone, and getting uncomfortable. That's a really good way of getting stronger. And I'd say mission accomplished, man, 'cause I'm pretty uncomfortable up here.
Josh, what would you rather do? 100-miler or speak in front of a group?
100 miles. So yeah, just a little background on me. I've been living in St. Louis for the last 10 years or so, but originally I'm from the Kansas City area. I was born in a little town called Richmond, Missouri, about 40 miles northeast of Kansas City. And, by the time I was 5, I was totally blind. But I wasn't born with any visual impairments, and for the first 4 years or so of my life, I had normal sight and no indication that anything was unusual. And I'm 40 now, so I don't have a clear memory of this, but I just remember that I went from having normal vision to just some vision loss taking place pretty rapidly, but I was just so young that I didn't realize that anything unusual was happening, I guess. I was too young to really understand, and it was a quick process. I mean, like I said, by the time I started kindergarten, I basically had no usable vision, and so I don't have a cool story. I wasn't wounded in combat or anything. I just have a hereditary retina disease that was pretty mysterious. That somebody my age wouldn't typically develop this type of vision loss, and nobody could really figure out the diagnosis. I found out years and years later when I had some genetic testing done that the gene mutation that was responsible for my vision loss actually was related to a whole different disease that comes with a lot of neurological problems and pretty scary stuff like seizures and problems with speech, and ultimately just people with this condition pass away when they're pretty young. So vision loss is just one of the symptoms, and fortunately for me, That's the only symptom I had was vision loss. But we didn't know any of that at the time, and I mean, it must have been shocking to my parents and just a confusing time that if they were overwhelmed by it at all, they couldn't let me see it. I had a pretty normal childhood, you know, and I had normal, you know, relationships with friends, went to school in Richmond, and but there was, you know, I had to search, you know, kind of for ways to kind of stay engaged and entertained, and you know, this is, I don't know, late 80s, early 90s, way before there was any internet or social media, YouTube, any of that stuff. So I spent a lot of time, you know, listening to the radio, and I'd still much rather, you know, listen than talk. Even now, my favorite forms of entertainment are audiobooks and podcasts and things like that. But at the time, you know, radio is what we had. A lot of it was on the AM dial, and I just listened to radio constantly. And part of what developed from that was just a love for sports. And I just spent countless hours listening to football and baseball and basketball and radio. And as I got a little older, you know, more and more of my friends were getting to play sports, you know, football, baseball, whatever. Same with my younger brother, you know, he played t-ball and then baseball and whatever. And I wanted to be part of that, and I wasn't really sure how to do it. I would listen to these games on the radio, and like when I would listen to a game, it wouldn't just be the game. You know, I would turn it on as soon as pregame started. I'd listen to all the interviews and all the pregame content, and then the whole game, and then the whole postgame. Like I was in for all of it. But that wasn't enough. You know, I wanted to be in the game too. You know, and I would spend hours, you know, just in my yard, tossing a ball around, like pretending to be the announcer. You know, and like making up imaginary stats, and you know, I'd have rosters memorized, and like I was just all about it. And but all that, it wasn't quite enough. And so finally, like one day, third grade, I was in class one day, and the gym teacher or somebody passed out like a sign-up sheet for the wrestling team, and I heard that, and I was like, finally, you know, a sport that doesn't involve a ball, and it's like maybe this is something I can do. So I took the paper home, and my parents signed it, and I went out for the team, and I was 8 years old at the time, and I was, you know, I was a pretty tiny 8-year-old. Even I remember my first practice, I got on the scale, and I weighed 47 pounds. So not a lot really changed. I've been a lightweight pretty much my life, but yeah, just I thank God that my parents, I know they had to have been a little reluctant to let me pursue this sport. I know, you know, my grandparents especially, and probably my parents to an extent, you know, they didn't want to see me get hurt, you know, and I understand that, but I never wanted to be, I just wanted to be a normal kid. I didn't want to be a kid that had to be protected because he was fragile, you know, and so what better way to prove that I'm not fragile than by wrestling. And so that's what I did, and I can't lie. I mean, the first couple of years I wrestled, I just got worked over pretty good, you know. I just I was not successful in the beginning, and I think I won maybe 10 matches in 2 years, and I mean, I think to an extent, I got a lot of attention for wrestling because, you know, with it being before social media and, you know, news didn't really travel like it does now. I was in rural Missouri. I was the only blind person I knew. And so everywhere I went to wrestle, people were just amazed that I was even there, you know. And most of the time I was just like, I might win one match at a tournament, but I would always lose twice and be eliminated, you know, and I would never actually place. But sometimes they would give me a medal anyway, just because, I don't know, they just thought I was brave, you know. But I really wasn't content just to be on the team. It was really driving me crazy that I wasn't winning. And after a couple of years, I was thinking about quitting. I remember really vividly, I was raised in a Baptist church family, and we spent a lot of time at church. My parents led the youth group for a while and taught some Sunday school and were in the choir, and so I did all those things too. And I remember it was after after services let out on Sunday morning, we were all having a meal at the church, and I remember I was going through the line with a friend of mine from church, and the conversation came up, and I said something like, I don't know if I'm going to wrestle again this year. I really haven't had a lot of fun, you know, and I would get super nervous too about competing. You know, I wanted people to think that I was this tough wrestler kid, but then the whole week I was super nervous leading up to the competition, you know, and I wasn't really having that much fun, and I was like, yeah, I think I might be done with wrestling. And my mom overheard part of that, and she's like, yeah, you're not quitting, or something to that effect. And so I didn't, and I went back out the third year, and I think, looking back on it now, I think it was God doing me a huge favor, because suddenly in year 3, I started winning a lot. And I don't really have another explanation. I didn't get any bigger, and I don't think I was much stronger. I don't know what it was other than just God stepping in and letting me taste some success, because He knew that I needed something good to happen, and I think He knew that my participation in sports would be really important down the line, and for all that to take place, I needed wrestling to go well, you know. And so in year 3, it clicked, and I started winning consistently, and I never had another losing season, and I continued wrestling all the way up through my senior year of high school. So yeah, I think as far as, you know, growing up and being socially well-adjusted and everything, a lot of that had to do with my involvement in wrestling, and you know, eventually the school district in Richmond couldn't really take care of all my academic needs, so I ended up going to a school for the blind in St. Louis for a couple of years, and you know, I kind of bounced around from that school to then I went back to, you know, I went to the Kansas School for the Blind, because that ended up actually being closer to home for me. And I had kind of a unique high school experience where I took half of my classes at Bishop Ward High School in Kansas City, Kansas, and I took the other half, you know, at the School for the Blind, and I stayed in the dorms at the School for the Blind. And, you know, wrestling kind of got me through those years, but you know, by the time I left school, you know, and went to college, I kind of had to kind of figure out my identity again. I went to Truman State in Kirksville, Missouri, and I was a good high school wrestler, but not good enough to wrestle in college. And I didn't really know what to do with myself. Once I got to college, I wasn't like a great student. I thought I had it all planned out. I was going to study journalism. It's like I thought that was a career that wouldn't require too much in the way of accommodations. I figured if I could just write, that's something I can do. And all the time that I spent listening to people on the radio talk, that just helped me develop a writing ability. I can sound like I know what I'm talking about, at least if it's in written form. And so I studied journalism. I worked for my school paper covering football and wrestling and other sports. And I did some sports, sports work at the radio station, doing some like sideline reporting and helping out with broadcasts. And all that was going pretty well, but I was having some trouble socially, just making friends and feeling comfortable socially. And so even though my parents really kind of pushed me toward, campus Christian fellowship and stuff like that, I ended up gravitating more towards fraternities, and I got into drinking pretty heavily, and I showed some pretty obvious signs, I think, of having a problem with alcohol when I was in school still. And so by the time I got out of college, I really, that's where things started to go a little south for me. My plans of being a journalist did not materialize the way I thought they would. I applied for a lot of jobs at newspapers where they would say that my writing portfolio was good, but they would never hire me because I couldn't take photographs and I couldn't help with page design. And so I really started to get bitter over that. And after I was unable to get into the journalism field, I tried to think of other things I could do. I applied for jobs in sports information departments at different universities and things, and I still ran into the same barriers, my inability to handle graphics and photos, and questions about whether or not I'd be able to use certain types of software. It just kept creeping up, and I just got more angry and bitter over these rejections. And so eventually I settled for a job, working in a collections call center. And I was happy to have a job, but I was not happy that I was being excluded from this career that I thought I deserved. And so I don't want to bore you with all the details, I guess, but I really, I really went through some dark periods later in my 20s and into my 30s where I was really disillusioned and drinking pretty heavily and not very thrilled with the direction of things. And I did, when I was about 25, I did find the sport of judo, which was similar sort of in some ways to wrestling, and I did that for several years, and that gave me an outlet that kind of helped me cope a little bit. But I loved judo, but it wasn't enough to keep me sober. And also just the anger and the bitterness and the drinking was really like I had no relationship with God during that time. And I'm just really thankful that that's not the way that I'm living today. And a big part of my kind of road recovery, it started with a move to St. Louis. And, I didn't really have a reason to move to St. Louis other than I needed a change of scenery, and I still knew a couple people from my days of going to the School for the Blind there. And so my girlfriend and I moved to St. Louis, and things didn't magically get better right away. I continued drinking, and then I discovered like these delivery apps that would literally drop it off right at my door, which is terrible. I mean, just no barrier to entry at all. Just it's too easy, you know. And, I had a job, but I was working from home, so I didn't have to hardly get, I'm just hanging out in my pajamas, basically. I could, drink whenever, and just as long as I did some work, there's just no way to live. And so I needed something to kind of get me back on a productive path. And Ryan mentioned Achilles, and Achilles International, obviously they have chapters all over the world. And so our St. Louis chapter was established in the spring of 2019, and I wasn't really a runner before that. I have talked about, wrestling, judo, I've done some jiu-jitsu, but the only running I really did was to cut weight for those other sports. I never really ran just for the sake of running. I even commented to my girlfriend a couple times, like, that sounds stupid. Like, why? How do you not get bored? Like, what do you do? But I am competitive, and so I started running on a treadmill at the gym, for a month or two leading up to when Achilles was going to get started. And my very first practice at Achilles, I got paired up with a guy, and we were running together, and we were, just kind of clicking along at a pretty leisurely pace, I thought. And I think Justin maybe knew I was a little bored, and he's like, "Hey, we got a straightaway, pretty clear path coming up here. Just want to open it up and see how fast we can go." And I'm like, "Absolutely," And so we did that, and I think he was pretty impressed and complimentary. He's like, "Hey man, you're pretty smooth, good, good stride, good balance. I think you've got some potential here if you want to, I think you can be about as good at this as you want to be, as long as you make an effort and work hard." And so I did, and I wasn't thinking about marathons initially. I was doing a lot of 5Ks, 10Ks, and I was thinking of maybe doing one marathon as like a bucket list kind of thing. And so it just became sort of an obsession, and I went from not running at all to running a lot. And so I had some trouble with stress fractures in the beginning. I just ramped it up really quickly, and I always had this habit of wanting my last mile to be my fastest one, even if I was on a treadmill. So I think that led to me, overstriding and picking my feet up too high and coming down on my heels. And I think that sort of bad form there, contributed to some of the injuries. But once I kind of got that sorted out and found the right shoes and everything, then I stopped having the injury problems. I did my first half marathon in St. Charles, Missouri, later in 2019, and just after that, I just wanted to keep increasing the distances, and so I've done 7 marathons since then, and a handful of 6-hour endurance runs, and 150-miler this past November, and tomorrow will be my first attempt at 100. And I don't even recognize the life that I have now. Ryan mentioned Goggins, and I heard him on Rogan's podcast, maybe in 2018 or 19, kind of around the time I was getting involved with Achilles, and I got his book, and it changed my life. He's not for everybody, and he's pretty profane at times, but his message just of enduring and overcoming just really resonates with me, and that sort of got me thinking about ultras. But I never thought it would be possible for me. I was like, first of all, I don't know if I can do it physically. Secondly, the number of guides that I would have to assemble to do this is crazy, and nobody's going to want to do this with me, but it took somebody like Ryan actually to say, hey, actually, this is possible. You're fit enough, and people will want to help you. You just have to ask, And that right there, I think, is maybe the biggest thing that I've realized over the time, since I've gotten sober and I've gotten into running, is that I used to be obsessed with independence, wanting to do everything on my own, not needing help. I took pride in that, but at a certain point, never asking for help is just stubborn, and unproductive and selfish, really. And you can't accomplish nearly as much on your own as you can when you let other people help you. And God's put so many people in my path recently, just at the right times, to help me. And I can't tell you how thankful I am for that. And I had one final little quick story. Just a couple days ago, I was thinking about what I was going to say up here, because I am not a speaker, and I was like, well, I'm sort of just going to tell my story, but what can I say that might have an impact on people? And there's a biblical podcast I listen to, Bema Fellowship podcast, and I'd been listening to it earlier in the day, but I had moved on to something else, and I was listening to some sports-related thing that I had paused, and when I went to resume it, for whatever reason, the sports thing I was listening to didn't come back on, but the Bible one did, and they were talking about Moses and how he was sort of an unlikely candidate to be leading the Jews out of Egypt, and how he also was an uncomfortable speaker. And anyway, the host of the show said something like, God's not interested in your qualifications. He's interested in your availability, your willingness, He doesn't care about your credentials to do a job. He cares about your willingness to step up and try it. So that's what I've attempted to do here tonight, and that's what we're all going to do tomorrow when we do our runs. And I'm just really grateful for the opportunity to share that message tonight. So thank you.
Wow, I don't know about you guys, but that had me very, very teary-eyed, and it's just, that is remarkable. Did you have any closing remarks, Ryan? Do you guys have a game plan for tomorrow?
Finish.
That's a good game plan.
2 hours.
Finish under 2 hours. So, is anybody a first-time 100-miler or first time at all out there in the heat? Oh, good, I got nothing to say to you then. Okay. Ryan, thank you so much. Guys, there's plenty more if you guys want to get seconds, and I think we have another lasagna in the oven, is that right? We have 2 still in the oven, so if you guys want to get some, feel free. Ryan and Josh, if you guys want to get some. And thank you all for coming out. Thank you for supporting our mission.
Yep.